Hey guys, thanks so much for being part of the webinar today. I am really excited to get started. I wanted to let you know, first of all, before we get started, I will be available to answer questions in the chat function after this webinar if you have more questions that I don't go over in this webinar. So just get your typing hands ready for that. I wanted to go ahead and introduce myself real quickly. I'm nonprofit Jenni. My name is Jenni Hartgrove, and I am a nonprofit consultant helping with marketing and development strategies for nonprofits. And so DipJar asked me to come here today so I could tell you some of my major advice that I give to my clients who come to me needing help with event planning. Event planning is a really huge part of your marketing and development strategy because events not only can serve as fundraisers, but they also are a great way for you to create a soft ask opportunity for potential major donors who you don't want to straight up ask for a giant check, but you can invite them to an event to get to know your organization. Events are also great for thanking your current donors and attracting new volunteers. So that actually leads right into my first piece of advice for your event planning. So I guess we can just go ahead and get started. So my first piece of advice for you is to really think through the goals that you have for whatever event you're trying to plan. This seems really simplistic, but I see a lot of organizations that try to kill all the birds with one stone. The phrase is killing two birds with one stone. And the reason that's even a phrase is because it's really hard to kill two birds with one stone. It's hard to do two things with one action. And so it doesn't really make sense to try to kill more than two birds with one stone when two birds are difficult on their own. So think of your two birds or your one bird. Pick one or two major goals for this event and make them realistic. It's okay to set a stretch goal if you do meet that realistic goal, but I really discourage smaller, brand new nonprofits who have no followers on social media, no marketing budget, from setting their goal for their very first event to be to raise $100,000. That's just not realistic unless you have Bill Gates himself ready to write you a $100,000 check for this event, in which case you probably don't need to be hosting the event. So set one or two major realistic goals, and then make sure that you break those goals down into smaller ones. If you can't break those goals down into smaller ones, that's a huge red flag that they are not realistic goals. So for example, if your goal is to make $50,000 with this first event, you should be able to break that down into smaller goals. You should be able to say, okay, we want to make $10,000 with our tickets. We want to make $30,000 with our sponsorships, and the last $10,000 we're going to make with add-on activities that are in the event, such as your DipJar or a silent auction or some encouraging recurring donors to sign up. That's what your smaller goals should look like. Next, this is my next major bullet point here. Think about your target audience. So your event should really be driven by whoever your target audience is. Every aspect of your event should be driven by this. Is your audience going to be bigwigs in the city who are older and wealthier? They want their time in the evening to themselves and to their families because they are C-level executives at organizations and they already go to a million galas? Or are you going for the older, wealthier guests who love these galas and those are their only social activities that they ever do? Or are you not even looking at those older, wealthier people in town? Are you looking at millennials who don't have their careers established yet? They are not making a ton of money. They're driving cars they can't afford and they're trying to look cool in front of their friends. Who is your target audience? You need to think about that. And then based on that, you set your ticket prices. Think about who would be interested in sponsoring your event because they want to get in front of that target audience. And then that should also drive the theme of your events because millennials are really going to look forward to maybe a networking event, but your older, wealthier guests who are old money don't need networking events. So, everything should really be driven by that target audience. Once you have that target audience, That can also help you determine other streams of revenue you can get from the event other than just your general ticket sales or a big donation ask. So, for example, if you have your older, wealthier guests, they're going to gravitate toward add-ons that are like a live auction with really huge trip packages, or maybe toward a wine wall, where, all your wine bottles are covered up in brown paper and they give a $50 donation for a blind wine that could either be a $5 bottle of wine or a $75 bottle of wine, but your younger audiences, your millennials, they're not going to care as much about wine walls and those live auctions because they can't afford that, or they just don't really care to spend $50 on a bottle of wine. Your younger millennial audiences are going to want add-ons like photo booths, or they will want to have maybe even a beer wall instead of a wine wall. So all of these activities are great ways to drive more revenue. You can incorporate DipJar into a lot of them, which I love. I always use DipJar for my wine walls, my beer walls, my photo booths when you're asking for a donation. And so those are just add-ons that you need to be thinking about for generating more revenue with your event, that really need to be driven by your target audience. My next major tip for your event planning is going to be leveraging what you already have, leveraging your current resources in order to attract sponsors. So one of those resources, like I mentioned, is your target audience. If you have millennials, you're going to want sponsors who are trying to get in front of millennials. So like fast food brands and phone case covers like OtterBox, things like that. Your older money, it's not that they don't want OtterBox, but you could get sponsors who have way more money, like really fancy jewelry brands or luxury cars. They have a lot more money to give away for these events. So leverage your audience as a resource. Leverage your social media audience for sure. A lot of companies really are looking at social media as one of their primary consideration factors for which events they're going to sponsor, because as you probably know, your organic reach just isn't getting as far these days on social media. And so if they can get kind of a free advertisement in their sponsorship package and to get in front of your social media audience, then that can help them just stay relevant in that field. Think about how many people are going to be attending your event. If you are having a gala, generally you'll require your board members to sell a certain number of tickets or to purchase a table and fill up that table. That's a great way to have a minimum audience that you can guarantee to your sponsors. If you are not having an event where you can confirm an audience because this is your first year hosting the event, or you just don't have a great big budget for it, I would really consider not having an admission fee so that you can attract more people. That admission fee really is not even going to get you the bulk of your money from the event. It's really going to be from your sponsors, and your sponsors aren't going to sponsor your event if you don't have a guaranteed audience. So it's not that you have to say you don't have an admission fee because you still want it to feel exclusive, but just consider giving away big bundles of tickets just so you can guarantee butts and seats. Other resources you might have for your sponsors just include every single place in your venue where you can put a sponsor logo. So maybe you have a bunch of tables where you can guarantee you'll get your logo in the center of 100 tables. Or maybe you're having a music festival that's outside, and so one thing you're going to have to provide to your guests are shade spots. Have each of those shade spots be sponsored by a different company. Are you having an awards ceremony where you could name the awards with a title sponsor? Do you have a bar where you could get an alcohol sponsor to get their name plastered all over the front of the bar? Think about every place where you could put their logo, and that is a resource that you can leverage for your sponsors. I know this can be a challenge for smaller nonprofits because maybe you don't really have a lot that you can give away. You can't say like, oh, we're going to put your company name in every radio advertisement for the event, because you can't afford radio advertisements for the events. But what you do have are clients. So maybe your sponsors, they are sponsoring the event just out of kind of good faith that you're going to do your hardest to get people at the event. But what they get is an audience in front of your clients. And so maybe like if you're a recovery center for women, then you can get women's brands who want to get in front of your clients. So like women's health brands or women's clothing brands, things like that. And maybe you're someone like Habitat for Humanity, where you're providing that type of service where you're helping people get into affordable housing. There are brands who want to get in front of those kind of lower income clients or clients who are needing to furnish their new house, you know? So you do have somebody that your sponsors can get in front of, even if you don't have a guaranteed audience necessarily for that specific event. And then this kind of leads into my final piece of advice for you with your event planning is to make your sponsors feel like they are getting customized sponsorship levels, even if you really don't have the time to customize every single sponsorship. Companies are getting hit by potential events that they could sponsor all the time. And they're looking for any excuse to kind of weed out competition so that they can really focus their efforts on the events that they care about. They are much more likely to look at your event if they feel like you have customized a sponsorship level for their brand specifically, or even if they just don't feel like you're just spamming every single company in town to try to get as many sponsors as possible, even if that's what you're doing. So here are some ways you can make your sponsorship levels feel special. First of all, approach them with several different methods. If you're just sending them an email, that can feel really spammy. It can feel like we have no idea how many people are getting this email, so why should we bother looking at it? They don't even know who we are. So give them a phone call real quick. Most likely they're not going to answer and you're going to have to leave a voicemail, but at least that voicemail tells them, oh, this person actually is trying to specifically reach out to my company. They're not just reaching out to every single company. Don't be afraid to go in person. Again, you are probably not going to be able to meet the director of marketing or whoever at the storefront of this company, but they will know that you made the effort to drive across town, find parking, and go in their shop and try to find the right person. If you just give the store clerk your sponsorship packages in a nice folder or an envelope and say, can you give this to your boss? Then their boss is going to know that you made that effort because they have something tangible in their hands. So that makes it feel a little more customized toward the company. Then make sure that everybody knows that you are willing to customize sponsorship levels. Not every company is looking for the same thing. And so generic sponsorship levels can just look really stale and like, well, I'm just one of the crowd and my logo is just going to be on a sign with dozens of other logos. No one's really even going to know my company. So find out what's important to that company and customize your sponsorship level for them. If they are a brand new company in town and they have a whole bunch of employees, maybe what's important to them isn't marketing value, but employee engagement. This especially is true for fulfillment centers or shipping centers that are for giant companies where they have a lot of turnover. So instead of putting their logo on every single place in the building, just put their logo on one side and give them 25 tickets that go with their sponsorship, you know? So something like that. A lot of companies are looking for employees, and so you can think through not just who is going to be at your event that they would want to sell to, but who's going to be at your event that they would want to hire. That's another way to think through your sponsors that you can approach. You can also customize a sponsorship with in-kind sponsorship opportunities. So, you're going to have to stock that bar with some sort of alcohol. You might as well get an in-kind sponsor who just donates all the alcohol. Or maybe you need transportation services. You need help picking up a bunch of stuff all over town. And so you can get a delivery service to give an in-kind sponsorship where they just go and pick up all the stuff you need for the event. And then you put their logo somewhere in exchange. So that's another way to customize. I would just say this is something that seems really obvious, but make sure your sponsorship paper, your proposal, says very clearly, we will customize the sponsorship. You can customize with a mix of financial and in-kind sponsorships. That's just something a lot of people don't think to put on their sponsorship package. So I feel like I have to tell that to every client I have, actually. So make sure that they know that you're open to customizing. And then another way you can make a sponsorship level feel custom, even if it's not, is just writing a quick note to go with the sponsorship packages. So, for example, let's say that you are doing a monster truck rally or a car show, right? And you want to ask Firestone to be a sponsor. Instead of just being like, hey, here's my event that's coming up. Let me tell you all about it. Tell you about me. Pick a sponsorship level you like. Instead of doing that, say, hey, Firestone, we have this car show that's coming up. We have this monster truck rally. And it just makes a lot of sense to have tires associated with that type of event. So we thought it would be really cool if you could be our premier sponsor, where we can put your tires everywhere. We could put them on the cars. We can give you a booth at the entrance of the event. We could put your logo on everything as a premier sponsor. And just that note makes them feel a little more like they are being wooed into a relationship, as opposed to you're just blasting out your information to everybody in town. So those are my major pieces of advice for any event that you're planning. If you do have more questions, please feel free. Now is the time to go ahead and type those into the chat, and I'll respond to them as quickly as I can. Please make sure that you're keeping your questions in the chat public in case somebody else has a similar question, or maybe they didn't even think to ask that question. And so just keep that public so that everybody can see your answer. If you need more help than just an FAQ question in the chat, you can reach out to me through my website, which is nonprofitjenni.com. I use a sliding scale for my clients so that if you have less revenue, we can work with your budget there. Also wanted to let you know there are free resources on my podcast, The Nonprofit Jenni Show, where I interview nonprofit professionals from several cause areas on every episode to answer questions about big issues that nonprofits are facing. And then I mentioned a couple times already in this presentation about how you can use DipJar to make your events really awesome. Seriously, I am not getting paid to say this. I love DipJar at my events, and I use them in as many ways as I can with the silent auctions or with the line walls, asking for extra donations in the center of tables at galas. I mean, really love DipJar. And you can get a discount on a DipJar now if you use the code Jenni. You can get 10% off your next DipJar purchase. And just remember, my name is spelled a little funny. It's Jenni. So that's the discount code. Just my name, Jenni, Jenni. And then if you have any other questions for DipJar, you can find them at dipjar.com. And so now I'm going to be answering those questions. So I'll still be here for a little bit if you want to type those in and make sure that they're public so that I can answer any questions you have about event planning.
Hi guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Jenni. That was an awesome presentation. And she's going to be in the chat answering questions for the next 5-10 minutes. I will also be answering a couple of questions, so I'm just going to touch on Krista's question, how to contact potential donors and get them to support one's company. So my experience, I'm going to touch on this one for Jenni while she's answering another question. In my experience, the best way to get people to support your company is to reveal your passion, because the reason that you're in this is because you're passionate. And at your events, you have to get people excited. You have to be engaging in your emails and your phone calls. People get phone calls and emails every day for sales pitches and donation requests. You have to make sure that you're exciting them and making sure that they know that they're doing something good. And I think it's a really noticeable difference at events when you see people raising money who are really passionate and exciting and develop a really strong connection with the people they're talking to, compared to people who are just talking to as many people as possible and just asking for money. So it's really, really important to make sure that you are, excuse me, that you are connecting with people on a personal level, which I think Jenni just touched on in your emails, to make sure that you talk to people by name. And if you know you have a phone call coming up with someone or an email address with someone, make sure that you do a little bit of research and try and remember either a conversation point if you met them in person, or do some research on their organization. Try and make it a more personal email. And that's difficult, obviously, if you're sending out lots and lots of emails, but it's definitely worth it, because people don't want to think they're getting spam emails. They want to know that someone took the time to reach out to them, to type the email out, and to genuinely need their help. So that's really, really important. So make sure you keep your questions coming through, guys. And remember that because of this webinar, you can use Jenni, Jenni, to get 10% off at the DipJar store. Not a problem, Krista. And to answer your other question, with the 10% off, DipJars are currently $360. That comes with a full support of both myself and our team of fundraising experts. We liaise with people like Jenni all the time. We try and soak up as much expertise as possible. So we try and pass that on to you guys. We want to make sure that your fundraising efforts are successful. Thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Patricia. And just a reminder, we will be sending out the presentation PowerPoint slides after the webinar. So if you did miss something at the beginning, or if you want to revisit some points or revise some points, that will be available to you. We'll send it out. EJ, how long does it take to get shipped with custom logo added? Our production team is incredibly fast. If you wanted your logo printed on the front, our team will have that done within 24 hours and shipped the next day. Depending on where you are in the United States, it could take 3 business days, sometimes as low as 2 business days, but almost every time it's shipped and printed within 24 hours. We want to make sure that you guys get it as quickly as possible. And if you do want to know what your custom logo is going to look like, we have a graphic design team that can send mock-ups, and they look incredible. The printer we have is very professional, and it really, really helps your branding. Approaching larger organizations, I'm not sure if Jenni has any points on this. I'll touch on it briefly. It is difficult. There are a few email addresses available on their websites. I would try and use all of the email addresses available. If you want to touch as many people as possible, I think that's the most successful way to go about it. It's quite difficult with larger corporations unless you've actually met someone at an event who's from that organization. But if Jenni has more points, I'll let her touch on that. Shirley, the promotion was for 10% off at our store, which is dipjar.com, and you use the code Jenni, Jenni. And I would highly recommend checking out Jenni's podcast, Nonprofit Jenni. She has some really, really great tips and advice, and she really is an expert in the nonprofit field. Krista, it's hard with corporations like Nike might not list personal email addresses for people, or larger corporations, but they might have emails like marketing at or sales at. I would do research on the company. It'd be a lot more difficult to do research on the person. If there is an email address for a person, it can never hurt to look them up on LinkedIn maybe send them a message on LinkedIn. You might have better luck getting in touch with them that way. At the end of the day, nonprofits are trying to raise money for a good cause. So I wouldn't be put off reaching out to these people as often and in as many different ways as possible. Make sure you keep your questions coming through, guys. Krista, do you want to just clarify? EJ, that is correct, yes. That's 6% and 17 cents. No, sorry. The 6% and 17 cents is taken from the $5, not added on to the person's charge. So it would be $5.63, if I've done my math right, which I probably haven't. The security is very, very tight. We have a off-site encryption company who encrypt all of the donations. As soon as someone dips, that fund is encrypted and sent off immediately, so nothing is stored on the actual DipJar. If you raise $10,000 in a day and the DipJar gets stolen, there's nothing stored. There's no information. There's no money. It's completely safe. We also have a brief security PDF. Some larger companies like to see that we are PCI compliant. If you need that, I'm happy to send that out to you as well. That just has a little bit more information on it. Hopefully that answered your question, EJ. I think Jenny's going to touch on that question a little bit, Krista, but in my experience, if I'm trying to research people, LinkedIn has some great information. The website always has great information. Really, it's any way you can find information about them without being too invasive. More often than not, you'll be able to find businesses, people they're associated with, enough just to make your email seem a little bit more personal. Thank you, EJ. And another reminder, we will be sending out Jenny's presentation. If you have more questions about it, feel free to reach out to myself at DipJar or Jenny. We're happy to help anyone we can. Patty, at the moment, we don't have rental options. I'm more than happy to jump on the phone with you, Patty, at either today or at some point this week, and we can talk through some options. And if you have a big event coming up, I'm more than happy to share what knowledge I have and some other examples of how people have used DipJar. Thank you, Krista. EJ, if you've got a lot of questions, you can contact support@dipjar.com, and they'll either put you in touch with myself or a member of our fundraising team. If you don't want to ask them all here, if you have a ton of questions, that's probably the easiest way to go about it. Once you've emailed that, I can also reach out to you personally and answer your questions for you. Jenny is giving some great answers in the chat, guys. So make sure you're using that resource because she really, really is a great resource in the nonprofit community. And definitely check out her podcast, Nonprofit Jenny. We will be wrapping up shortly, so if you have any more questions, please fire them through. If you can't think of the questions now, or if you think of one later, you can reach out to either DipJar at support@dipjar.com, or you can reach out to Jenny. We're happy to answer any questions you have. I'm happy to jump on the phone with people if you'd like to talk in more detail. We want to make sure you guys get the most out of this as possible. Okay. Does anyone have any final questions they want to shoot through? Myself and the fundraising team I work with will be available all week and forever. If you do have any more questions, please reach out to us. We'd love to help. We'd love to answer questions. We will be sending the PowerPoint out, like I said before, so if that raises any more questions, feel free to call us. Thank you, Alexis, for listening in. I hope you found something useful. As long as everyone learns one thing, then we've done a good job. All right, we're going to wrap things up now, guys. Thank you so much for listening in today. A huge thank you to Jenni for that awesome presentation. I think we've all learned something, including myself. Like I said a number of times, Jenni and myself and my team are available all the time if you need any questions answered, if you want to brainstorm some ideas. Jenni has also just sent her email address through, nonprofitjenni@gmail.com. Please reach out to her. She is a nonprofit genius and she'll help you however she can. Again, thank you all for listening in. This was a blast and we hope we can do this more often in the future. If you think of more questions once we're gone, please reach out to us. We'd love to answer them. We'd love to help. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.